life wasn't meant to be lived, constantly stressed out, under pressure, this heaviness, breaking down left and right, while trying to achieve like financial wealth, material wealth, and completely disregarding emotional wealth. That's not how life is meant to be lived.
Welcome to What If It All Works Out? My name is Sophie Callahan, and I started this podcast because I wanted to empower women to show up confidently and consistently online as themselves by sharing stories and examples of what things look like when they all work out. My career began in photography, and I am now a marketing and mindset coach for female entrepreneurs and the mum to two little girls. I teach you everything that I learned over 10 years in my business about content marketing and building the life of my dreams so that you can do the same. My guests here have inspiring stories to tell, knowledge for us to learn from, and really valuable experiences to share with us. So grab a cup of tea and get ready for conversations that will change your mindset, your business, and the way you show up in your life. I want to begin this episode with a trigger warning. In this conversation, we discuss topics such as depression and attempted suicide. So if you feel that this discussion might not be for you, please click back now. But if you are interested in the topic of mindset and improving your mental health, I will just tell you now, this episode is so powerful that it moved me to tears. Sophia Manarolis has a master's degree in counselling psychology and is a certified life coach, and she is absolutely passionate about helping people improve their mental health. But there's a good reason for this. Sophia has struggled with her own mental health throughout her life, suffering 4 major depressive episodes and surviving multiple attempts to take her own life. With a clearer, healthier mind, she now feels extremely fortunate to still be alive and has made it her mission to help others understand the power of gratitude, mental wealth, and emotional intelligence on their own lives. Sophia is so open and honest. We talk in depth about how gratitude is an absolute game changer, about how important it is to look after our mental health and how to set boundaries, make sure our needs are met, and all about limiting beliefs such as imposter syndrome and comparisonitis. There is so much gold in this episode, whether you struggle with your mental health or not. This conversation was just such an important one to have, and I'm honestly so glad that I get to have this on my podcast for everybody to benefit from. Please welcome Sophia Manarolis talking about why your mental health matters. Hi, Sophia. It's so nice to see you.
Likewise.
Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to What If It All Works Out. We've been trying to get this recording done for so long, haven't we? And there's been so many backwards and forwards. And I'm so keen to get your message out to my followers because I think what you do is incredible. Your story is incredible. I'm so excited for you to be here.
Thank you. I'm also excited to be here, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be able to be on your show and to get this very important message out to your followers. So I'm grateful that you appreciate the message and that you've given me this chance to do this today. So
let's start with what it is you do, how you've got to where you are now, and kind of your story. If you could just kind of give my audience a little bit of a background.
Sounds good. So I typically prefer to start with my story rather than what it is I do, but I'll throw, basic introduction. I'll throw that out there. So I'm a mental health strategist, emotional wealth coach, author, speaker, founder of the I'm Alive movement, all things that are going to tie into, my story as well. And in terms of mental health strategist, I often get asked, what does that even mean? And it's I have a plethora of training in counseling and psychotherapy. So I do have a master's in counseling psychology, but I'm also a certified life coach, and I combine the two. So I am able to explore the past and the present and work towards the future with my clients, but I'm all about giving strategies. Literally, it's what the title says, mental health strategist, because I think that's the one thing that's really missing when people go see a therapist or, try and get some form of help for their mental health. They feel heard for the most part, but then they walk out and they're like, okay, but now what? So the way we have a business strategist, life strategist, whatever strategist, I'm like, well, mental health is pretty important. So mental health strategist it is. So that's for that. But more importantly, honestly, and for the longest time, I was saying that while introducing myself even, or in my bios on all my social media platforms, I would say something like, I'm a major depression and suicide attempt survivor. So for a while, I phrased it this way: I am a major depression suicide attempt survivor. And a couple months ago, I met this awesome mindset coach on LinkedIn. And after chatting and sharing my story, he's like, are you currently suffering from depression or, suicidal ideation? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. And he's like, so then stop saying I am a major depression
Yes.
suicide attempt survivor. I was a major depression suicide attempt survivor. And I was like, whoa. So I like, and stop, my depressive episode or my third depressive, because there's been four. I did this. It looks like there's been eight.
Yeah.
There will not be another four. There's been four. And it used to be like, okay, well, in my third episode, this is how this happened. And this is when, that. And it's like, no, they're not even they don't belong to me anymore. So
Yeah.
gotta love mindset work. And even though I do a lot of
yeah.
that myself, it hadn't even occurred to me to what extent the use of language in my own case, in sharing my story, how much that affects my own progress as well. So I was a major depression suicide attempt survivor, and I've made it a point with this movement that I founded called the I'm Alive movement. I've made it a point to prevent as many people as possible in this world to not experience what I have, because I attempted to end my life on more times than I can count on my fingers. And there's no history or anything like this of depression in my family. I recently wrote a book and launched it, and it's called Depression Doesn't Discriminate. And the reason I made it a point, like if you just see the cover of the book, like it couldn't be more like poignant, like depression doesn't.
For those listening, it is a black book with
Oh yes,
really bold
massive
white
font.
writing, and
There's a
doesn't is in huge words in the middle.
Right. So I made it a point to put that out there because there is no history in my family. The thing is, once you've had one major depressive episode in your life, you automatically become more vulnerable and prone to having another in the future if you're under periods of great distress, stress, pressure, not listening to your needs, essentially not loving yourself really. It could happen again. And then if you've had one suicide attempt, then you automatically become more vulnerable and prone to having more in the future if ever you are experiencing major depression again. So, all this to say, it was no history or whatnot. I just put a lot of pressure on myself in the first year of university. And I had a nervous breakdown, which honestly led to a depressive episode. I had to withdraw from my studies. And from there, this made me more prone to having one in the future. And you'd think I'd get it right the first time or the second time, but no, there were four in total, and a lot of unresolved trauma that I just didn't heal from in between, that just led to another episode happening. But whatever the case may be, my motto is that life is too short to be or feel anything else but alive. And so for this reason, I created the I'm Alive movement to help people feel that, right? So to be alive, as in, I don't want you suffering unnecessarily, burning out as a result of this constant unnecessary suffering, such as stress and pressure and bottled up resentment. So rather than to be experiencing this unnecessary suffering, which leads to burnout, which is even further unnecessary suffering, which is then only has a fine line that you may cross over to depression, which is the ultimate unnecessary suffering, right? Rather than, have to experience any of that, right? I want you to be alive, because if you get to that point, then you may risk ending your life, right? I'm very fortunate to still be here. So I want you to be alive. I don't want you to die. I want you to be alive, but I also want you to feel alive. Because you're just walking around and okay, you've got a pulse. That's great. Let's be grateful for that pulse. But at the same time, life wasn't meant to be lived, constantly stressed out, under pressure, this heaviness, breaking down left and right, while trying to achieve like financial wealth, material wealth, and completely disregarding emotional wealth. That's not how life is meant to be lived. So from all my experience, my story and whatnot, this movement was created with the twofold purpose of preventing people. And I know it's tough, right? Most people won't invest in prevention, but I've made it a goal. So let's prevent people from getting there. And the second purpose is let's normalize the conversation. Let's normalize the conversation around burnout, depression, suicide, all of it, so that no one ever suffer in silence ever again. And so there you have it. That's literally
unbelievable. I mean, what, like, I have so much.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I know.
So much to say.
I went on there for a second. I get excited.
It's brilliant. I love how passionate you are about it. But I feel like it, firstly, what an incredible way to turn around such a trauma for you, and such a dark time, and all of that, and you've turned that around and used that for good, which I just think is so inspirational and so incredible. And I mean, we live in such a fast-paced world, don't we? And there's so much pressure. And, like you say, some of it just comes from ourselves, and some of it comes from society and other people, and keeping up with, you know, appearances and everything. And I think that the fact that you are normalizing that, it's okay not to feel those pressures and to kind of buy into that fast-paced life, and all of that is just so worthwhile. And yeah, I mean, when we talk about an important message to share, I don't think there is one that is perhaps more important than this, because at the end of the day, if we don't have our mental health, we don't have anything really, do we?
Mm-hmm.
So talk more about you mentioned you covered that you're a mental health strategist. So can we talk more about what that involves and how that helps people, and the tools that you use?
Well, essentially, from my experience, I mean, after doing this for at least 10 years at this point, time and time again, I noticed that my clients, I found myself, even though we tailor the experience to each client, everybody's unique in what they bring to the table and whatnot, and what they're suffering with. Um, I found myself repeating certain things over and over, and I was like, wait a second. If only we just had this course,
Mm-hmm.
at this class, this full course or whatnot, at some point in our life during, I don't know, late elementary or primary school, high school,
Right.
early college years, whatever. Even later, it would have been great. But nowhere did we ever have a course teaching us how to, well, first of all, understand our inner critic, understand that what's really going on at that point when these negative messages are coming into our mind and whatnot, that's an inner critic that's been formed over
Yeah.
time. Nobody ever taught us anything about that. How to build our self-esteem, how to love ourselves, how to identify our own needs to be able to meet them. Like, even if you're a mom or a dad or whoever, and you're trying to do your best to meet your kids' needs, that doesn't automatically mean disregard your needs, right? But at the same time, people don't even know what their needs are because they've never even been taught the vocabulary to express. We talk a lot about not knowing the words to express feelings, but needs are major. And,
Yeah.
if we're not living aligned with our needs, that disequilibrium is what creates all this unnecessary suffering, that extra stress, that frustration, anxiety that eventually could lead to depression. It's not living aligned with our needs. So I realized this as time went by, that whatever it is, because I had a lot of contracts with employee assistance programs of major corporations, because I was born and raised in Montreal. So I was there for the most part. For your listeners, I'm in Greece now, the last 2.5, almost 3 years, but I was initially in Montreal, Canada. So on all these companies and whatnot, when I was sent clients, it's not like I did the intake call. It was usually somebody else. And whatever the reason was, they somehow managed to pair that person up with me. So then they would come to me, and whatever it is they brought to me, whatever it was, whether it was a workplace conflict, a relationship difficulty, overwhelm, anxiety, feelings of burnout, anger, anything, at the end of the day, I recurrently found myself teaching them about identifying their needs and
Mm-hmm.
learning how to meet them themselves and effectively communicate them without feeling guilty about it. Right. So learning to love themselves in the
Yes.
process. I recognize that, people really needed this. And it didn't have to be someone coming to me in crisis to have to learn about this or whatnot. I used to run anger management groups as well, and it was mostly for court mandated people. And as I found myself teaching all these tools, I'm like, wait a minute, I could think of my neighbor, my cousin, and many other people that would benefit from knowing what I'm teaching people who have been court mandated to come learn this. So
Yeah.
over time, I just said, okay, you know what? Like, people need to learn this. And I'm really good at teaching. So put this in a course, right? I love doing one-on-one work. I love doing group work. Honestly, any work really that involves helping people. But the fact that, there was such a recurring theme along the way where most people just don't know how to identify their needs, don't know how to let go of anger that's not serving them, and or how to recognize anger that is serving them and like see the gift behind it, right? Don't know how to forgive, don't know how to communicate what they want. The fact that like that was across the board with anyone who presented themselves, like whether it was somebody in their late teens, young adult, in their 60s, whatever, divorced, gay, straight, anything. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it was the common theme that people just don't know how to listen to their needs or how to identify them to begin
Yeah.
with, and to start living their lives accordingly, whether it's a career related decision, a relationship related decision, or anything in life, really. Listening to our needs is huge. Yeah, I provide strategies basically for people to be able to do that.
Perfect. And can you give us a couple of ideas of how one might start doing that, kind of start doing that work?
Well, for starters, I just want to point out, I know maybe we would have mentioned this later, but I'd like to offer everybody, all your listeners, my I Dare You to Love Yourself ebook. So in this ebook, I mean, there's a PDF version and they call it a digital version. And then it's like, what's the difference? Ebook automatically means digital, right? But what I mean by that is that there's video clips in it, right? So I've taken parts of my course, challenges that I've run and whatnot, and I've included it in this ebook. So in total, it would be a little less than an hour of one's day, really, to watch
Mhm.
this, but they're broken down. So, you could spend like 15 minutes or 10 minutes or whatnot. You don't have to watch the entire thing. So in this ebook, I do teach people, like I do give them a great introduction to, reflecting on what it means to love oneself authentically and how to even stop and think of, what your needs are. Like just actively making a list.
Yeah.
Right? Like just let me sit there and say, you know what, right now in my life, what are the top 5 most important needs in my life at the moment? If you're struggling with writing 5 needs down, right? Very often in the tasks that I give in my course, it's like top 10, right? But even if with 5, if you're struggling with finding 5, I teach people, in my course how to find those
Yes.
5, right? But also just I present you with a list, really. Sometimes it's that simple. Like even if you
Yeah.
didn't invest in a course of mine and you didn't even download the free ebook and you just went to Google and you typed up list of needs, right?
Yeah.
And you just looked at it and allowed yourself to be like, you know what? Let me look at this right now and pull out what in this moment I deem to be the top 10 most important needs in my life. Okay, let me start writing them out, like without any order, right? Just go ahead and put them on paper, whatever
Yeah.
instinctually comes to you in that moment. And then from there, ask yourself, well, from 1 to 10, and sometimes people struggle with this because they're like, well, they're all important.
Hmm.
There are some right now that you would be able to put like, oh, this is a 2, this is a 3. So even if you've written out 10 needs, it might not come to you automatically like that, oh, that was the first one. You might have written it, but it's not really the priority in your life right now. So just look at that list of 10 and then ask yourself, which one's like number 1 right now? Which one's number 2? Which one's like whatever, until you've put, 1 to 10, and
Yeah.
start prioritizing the ones that made it in the top 3 at least. It doesn't mean number 8, 9, 10 are not important, but maybe 8, 9, 10 are a little bit more met than 1, 2, 3 is. So they're really equally important at the end of the day. It's just that right now, at this present moment, there's a lack in maybe those first 3, 4, and that's why they've made it so high up on your
Hmm.
list. There's a
Yes, that
lack
makes
there,
sense.
right? So in my ebook, I even like demonstrate to people how to like even reflect, like, what does this need even mean? Because that's another thing. You put it on a list. Okay, now you know it's important. Now what? How do I Okay,
Yeah.
so I know a need for autonomy is really important, and I know a need for this is really important, but what exactly does this mean to me? Because what it means to you and what it means to me and to the next person is not exactly the same thing. So the sooner
Yeah.
people learn to identify the needs, what they mean, how they could start meeting them themselves, right? Because I often give this analogy where, you know what, and it's much more elaborate in my course, but for now I'll just give like
Cliff
if
notes.
I'm
Yeah.
if I if I'm really thirsty, right, and I'm somebody who gets dehydrated very easily, I could talk a lot and all that, and so now if you keep walking by, if I'm at a restaurant, right, or somewhere anyway that normally we're served water, and I'm starting to feel a headache coming on because someone hasn't come by in a while to pour me a glass of water, right? I could sit there and keep waiting and keep expecting for that person to come fill my glass of water. Meanwhile, I could even see the table across that has like the jugs of water that are supposed to be served at the tables. I could sit there and keep waiting. I could sit there and get frustrated because I've given an indication that I would like for the server to come see me. I could let myself suffer, or I
Yeah.
could just get up after a while and go get that jug of water myself and come pour some in my cup, right? So that I
Yes.
don't risk. Now, would it have been nice, if I drink it, if I grab a jug and there's not that much in it and it just gives me a little bit, like enough to, okay. And then somebody comes along and pours more into my cup. That's great. Thank you very much. But could I live without the person coming and pouring the rest in the cup? Yes, I can. Because I relied on myself to meet my need, which
Yeah,
is
that's brilliant.
to get some water in there. So all of our needs, and then again, this isn't obvious to a lot of people. We weren't taught to reflect on this, but a lot of our needs, even if one of your top needs right now in your career, even, or, anywhere in your relationship, if recognition, for example, which is a pretty important need for a lot of people, if that makes it high up on the list and you're consistently, waiting on your boss, for example, to come tell you, well, Sophia, you did a really good job this week with all these clients that you saw. We're getting a lot of great feedback from, the customer service survey, because I don't have access to the clients after this.
Yeah.
They call in the employee assistance program. If I were to wait
Yeah.
for someone to come tell me, given how overwhelmed people usually are in this field and whatnot, then I'd be getting dehydrated and developing a migraine. But instead, for myself to recognize at the end of that call or at the end of that session, like, wow, great job. Like really that resonated with the client. They walked out satisfied. You could tell they felt relieved. They felt lighter. You saw it in their posture. Like, let me just take the time to fill my cup myself at that point. And
Yeah.
if a supervisor shows up at some point and decides to pour more in the cup, which would be like to recognize my efforts and the extra time I've been giving and whatnot, then great. I'll feel, at that point, I won't be thirsty. You know what I mean? It'll be satiated from.
Yeah. It's just
But
extra. It's a bonus.
yeah, but if the supervisor never comes around to tell me, at least I sat there and relied on myself and put some in the cup, right?
Yeah.
That was just one example. So people haven't been taught how to do this.
No.
And it's huge. So that less people are walking around frustrated because they're constantly expecting or shoulding, right? This person should
Yeah.
come and tell
Yeah.
me this, or should be more this, or should. It's like, oh, or, no shoulds allowed.
Yeah, no shoulds. Yeah, we had this conversation, didn't we?
Yeah, no shoulds allowed. It's an ugly word. I talk about it in the ebook as actually, truth be told, out of those 52 minutes, I think there's a 17-minute clip just on the word should in my
Oh,
free
really?
ebook. Right. So for people who are pervaded by this word, because a lot of people are and they don't even realize it, I'm pretty sure the free ebook, again, with no obligation to sign up to anything else, could be really life-changing for
So
whoever.
tell me how do we get that? I'll put the link into the show notes
Sure.
so that people can get, and that's called I Dare to Love Yourself, and that's a completely free ebook.
Yeah. I mean, okay, full transparency. To access it, you do need to plug in your email. But I'm not somebody
Okay,
who
yeah.
I
Yeah.
might email you once every like 6 months. Because it's in a community, to be able to access the document, you sign up with your name and email, and then you have access to the It's 316 and I'm Alive community that will lead you to that specific ebook, a PDF version, the version with all the video clips. But then there's a lot of other free resources in there as well, including a gratitude toolkit that people could, get their
I love
hands
that.
on to integrate more gratitude into their daily life. So by going to I dare you to love yourself.club, that's simple.
You
Join
get all the free resources.
I'm basically telling you, join the self-love club, right? So I dare you
Yeah,
to love yourself.club. So I really recommend.
wonderful. And that leads me really nicely into what I wanted to talk about next, because you talk about the fact that I feel like people don't realize that they can fill their own cup with affirmations and what did you call it, like praise for themselves, and to tell themselves that they've
Recognition.
done a good job. And I think one of the reasons that people don't understand that is because this culture of imposter syndrome is just absolutely rife, and especially within women in business. And I know that you do a lot of work around kind of low self-esteem and self-doubt and other limiting beliefs like that. So can you talk to me about how, if you're running a business and you're feeling this sense of imposter syndrome and you're feeling really limited by that kind of thing, how might you move past that and kind of overcome things that are getting in your way?
Well, a couple things. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, we weren't taught how to shift our perspective or our limiting beliefs. And in the field of psychology, they're called cognitive distortions. Right? It sounds a little bit more intense than limiting belief in the coaching field, right? I tend to call them self-esteem wreckers.
Yes.
So how to get past this? Well, for starters, to recognize that when you're engaging in comparisons, for example, this is you actively adopting self-esteem wreckers. This is you actively taking steps towards wrecking your own self-esteem, which of course impedes on your confidence as well in business or in any area of your life, right? Sometimes people interchange self-esteem and self-confidence, and it's not interchangeable, but one definitely affects the other. And in this case, it's very, it's very difficult to be confident without first loving yourself, right?
Yeah.
And having higher self-worth. That there are people walking around with some confidence, but ultimately still not really listening to their needs, and sacrificing their self-esteem, their worth and whatnot in the process. That does happen. But honestly, we are the ones who create our unnecessary suffering for the most part. It does stem from the way we were taught certain things growing up, and not having not having learned certain other things growing up. But unfavorable comparisons have been in our thought process from very, very young. So if you, like in my case, I'm turning 40. If I spent 7 years of comparing myself because maybe my parents did, or maybe my teacher did very often too, that will not be unlearned overnight. Okay,
Yeah.
it just won't. So I could sit there and tell you, plug in these affirmations, da 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 da. It takes a little bit more work than that, right? Which is also something that I cover in my course, because if it took that long for you to adopt this way of thinking, this self-esteem wrecker, okay, there's this
Yeah.
thought, it's not going to take 5 minutes to just get you to stop comparing yourself. Now, mindfulness is huge. So starting to become aware, first of all, of how often you do this, right? Or catching yourself, because a lot of people don't even catch themselves. They
Yeah.
engage in a comparison or an assumption or in overgeneralizing something or catastrophizing something, really. A lot of people engage in that so automatically, and it ends up frustrating them further or fatiguing them, really, and they don't even recognize that that was because their thought, the thoughts, they just happen so quickly. But if people just pause and start listening to themselves, if you're consistently feeling frustrated, or there's a roadblock somewhere, you don't feel confident enough to proceed in your business or to try making the sale or whatnot, you gotta take a step back, take a few deep breaths, and ask yourself, well, why did that just happen? Why did I hold back from mentioning this to my client right now? Or why did I hold back just this moment from, well, setting this boundary really in this session? Why this or why that? Like, take a moment and actually think about it. Like, what just crossed my mind moments
Yeah.
ago, right? Like, I was feeling okay, and then suddenly I'm feeling frustrated. Why did that just happen? What did I just tell myself? Or did I just compare myself to someone? How did that even serve me? How
Yes.
does it, how most people will not stop. They'll look at how they could serve others, right? And they'll look at ways and actions that can help others and whatnot. But in terms of serving ourselves, how is a comparison at that point? Or putting myself down, right? Or I guess even assuming a worst case scenario. How is doing any of that serving me?
Yes. Yeah. It's
Right?
not.
And it's not. But if
Yeah.
someone doesn't actually stop to think about it, wow, this is actually not helpful. Like, let me
Yeah.
just stop doing it. Let me shift for a second to a much more helpful thought, or a grateful thought, for example. Because it's very hard to feel frustrated, anxious, stressed, and grateful at the same time,
Yes. Yeah.
right? But because those thoughts come so quickly, learning to just catch them, slow down, and instead replace them with a grateful thought, that could do
Yeah.
wonders in terms of building greater mental resilience, even, and someone's confidence in business.
It's a muscle, isn't it? Like the more you use it, the more I think people don't understand how much control we have over our mindsets and, over our beliefs and our thoughts, and our moods essentially. And yeah, I think the more you do it and the more you practice it, and the better you get at catching those negative thoughts and at reframing them and turning them around into something else. But I mean, like, as in my role as someone who teaches content creation, I have clients who are sitting on banks of content that they've created, but they're so terrified to put out because they're terrified of judgment and of failure, and they think
Mm-hmm.
they're not good enough, and it's so debilitating. And I always try and I think it's along the same lines of what you were just saying. I try and say to them that content that's sitting there in your drafts is not serving you in any way. Like, you've done all of the work, you've made all of the effort, and then you've fallen at the last hurdle because you're scared of what might happen. But if you don't put the content out, and if you don't show up and you are not present and visible,
Mhm.
then you're failing anyway. I guess is the answer, right?
Well, that, and someone once told me that it's funny when I wasn't getting my own content out, how selfish it was. That I
Yes,
was I was
yes,
hanging on to this, and I was like, "Ooh, hold on a second." From the moment that I want to help people as much as possible, and like I've poured the darkest parts of my life in my book, but before putting it in a book, I would go live about it. So there were moments where I could be really vulnerable and raw and show people like what I've experienced because I really want to open their eyes. Right?
Mhm.
I keep saying it's a movement of gratitude and hope. So the gratitude part is to prevent the depressive piece, like to prevent the burnout, is by integrating more gratitude into our lives. But the hope part, it also stands for the acronym HOPE, help open people's eyes. So here I am on the one end, so vulnerable, right?
Yeah,
On a live stream in a book, because that's how important it is to me to open people's eyes. And then on the flip side, I will have created these wonderful courses and whether short master classes, you name it, and not really, not I am now, but I wasn't. That's not like putting them out there.
yeah,
And so when I was called selfish for not doing so, I was like, what? I'm sitting there giving you my darkest part of the like things that people would never. And I'm like, so that was very helpful for me at that point when I realized it's selfish to hang on to this right now and to not just go live and mention that you have this like $47 needs master class. I'm not even asking for, crazy stuff here, like
yeah,
$47 class. And yet, why wasn't I putting it out there? So it's not serving me to sit there after I did spend all that time putting it together. And it's not serving the people out there who desperately need this course to start
yes,
living aligned with their needs and being and feeling alive, just like the purpose of my movement is, right? Which I don't even want to call it my movement anymore. I think it's our movement, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
I mean it's such a great way to reframe sales in general. Like I think, what you're doing is kind of the extreme of that, but every business in one way or another serves and helps somebody and solves a
oh
problem for
yes,
somebody,
of
right? And
course.
even I get people come to me and they're like, I don't really solve a problem. I sell artwork or I run a restaurant. And I'm like, well, you do, because if somebody wants to go out and have a nice meal and they don't know where to go, you solve that problem for them. And like you say, if you are keeping that to yourself, whatever it is, however small the problem you solve, it is selfish. And somebody wants your service and they are happy to pay for it, then that is such a great way to reframe sales, is that if you're not offering it, you're doing everybody a disservice and you you are being selfish.
Yeah, to the point where it's
A
at
good
that
way to
level. Like
look.
it's such a disservice that it's selfish because I don't want to sit here and
Yeah,
start
yeah.
labeling people as
No.
selfish either. But yeah. And
Yeah.
so also going back to all these things you brought up about the imposter syndrome and, the comparisons and all these things. Look, at the end of the day, especially for someone who is not putting themselves out there or not putting their content out there, whatever it is that you're encountering in your business, right? And whatever problems people are bringing to you and whatnot. A lot of times people are focused on things they can't control.
Yes.
And if I sat here and made a list of all the things I can control in my life, so I grab my large notepad that I usually use in session and start writing. I can't control this. I can't control this. I can keep going, right? And as I'm going, I'm feeling more and more helpless. The more I keep writing, I start to feel anxious, right? Because helplessness, breeds anxiety. So as I keep going, I'm feeling frustrated because anger usually kicks in because everything else is uncomfortable. So anger comes in to kind of save the day for a moment. But anger is exhausting though. So as I keep going, I'm more and more depleted. And then, which more tired you are, the more anxious. Like any emotion becomes more intense. The more you're tired if you haven't eaten and taken care of yourself. So I'm sitting there and I'm still writing all these things I can't control. And by the end of it, I've created a depressive episode because I've just taken that helplessness to another level. Now, why on earth would anybody want to do that, right? Sit there and write out all the things that they can't control. So what I propose instead is for your audience right now and your clients at large, it could be, I think I'm pretty sure this tool is also, so if some of you are like, maybe you're driving, listening to this, and like, oh no, I'm not catching all of this right now. It's all good. Besides having, re-listening to this, it is also in the I Dare You to Love Yourself ebook. But it could be something as simple as grab a notepad, however big it is, flip it horizontally, put a line in the middle, okay? Like completely dividing it equally. On the left-hand side, right, things I can't control. And on the right-hand side, things I can control, right? So on the left, it's cool. The way our brain is designed, I mean, we've evolved as human beings, but our brain hasn't necessarily like it's a pretty old mechanism, let's just say. And so it's designed to focus a little bit too much on the negative or whatnot as a method of protecting ourselves. Now, we're no longer presented with saber-toothed tigers, but yet our brain tends to get us to react as if we are, right? As if putting out your product and getting a rejection, right? Which, somebody just saying, I don't want it. And the reaction could be as if there was a saber-toothed tiger in front of you. Meanwhile, it's like, all that just happened right now is that your product is not meeting this person's needs. This is a rejection ultimately. When people are like, what if I tell them how I feel and get rejected? Well, that doesn't mean you're not good enough. That just means you or your service or whatever it is you're talking about, it does not meet the needs of the person in this moment. That's all.
Right now. It might do in the future.
That's it. It's not a reflection of your product not being good enough or of you not being good enough, right? It just means this isn't meeting the person's needs right now, right?
Or you haven't got the message to them clearly enough, which
that might be it. Yes,
very often.
Oh, I could totally vouch for not having the message down packed. So it's happened to me enough times. And now all this to say, going back to the things that we can't control, whether people are going to say yes or no, you could make your message, they could hire whoever, right? And have this great message and touch on all the key points that are very relevant to this person and this person's top needs in their life right now. For whatever reason, they might still say no.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you just can't control that. You can't control whether somebody's going to like you or not. Right. You can't control like what's going on in somebody else's journey in their business or in their relationship. You just can't, right? You can't control someone's opinion of you. You can't. You can do whatever you can to be like an upstanding citizen and really, a great professional in what you do or whatnot. Okay. At the end of the day, there's going to be people who still don't like you.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, there are going to be people who are more experienced than you too, right? Who've been doing this longer, who are going to make the sale a lot quicker for whatever reason. Maybe there are more papers on the wall and that actually makes a difference for someone. Maybe there are less degrees on the wall, but the fact that this, and this, which led them to relate to your story more, that's all that did it. And you might have a better product, but the person's story so whatever the case, there's so much we can't control. If we just put it on that side of the paper and instead shift and focus on the things we can control, wow, big difference. If you look at what you can't, helplessness. If you shift over and start writing out, what can I control though? And the more you start putting stuff on that side of the paper, the more empowered you feel. So it comes down to it. Do I want to keep creating my suffering and possibly create a depressive episode because I'm stuck on the shit I can't control? Or will I have to actively shift gears and look at what I can control, which is finally put the product or make the launch?
And would you agree in that something that I teach quite a lot is that once you focus on what you can control, the things that you can control become more. Like some of the things that will be on the can't control list, because you've focused on the can control list, end up shifting over. So we talk about like the algorithms on Instagram and that kind of thing. We can't control those. Nobody even knows really how they work. They're insane and everybody hates them and we can't control them. There's no point in dwelling on it. But if we focus on the things that we can control, like the quality of our content, how often we show up, how we help people, then the algorithms actually become within our control because our message is getting out there, people are engaging with us, and we are improving our own work. So the things that we can't control then actually become within our control just because we weren't focusing on them, if that makes sense.
It does. And wherever you shift your focus, you put more energy in and whatnot. This has been proven. So again, it's your choice. Stay on the right side of the paper. It's the right thing to do. And one of the key things you could put on the right side of the paper is also accepting the things you can't control.
Yeah,
because it's one thing to put, I usually start off when I'm doing this exercise with people in a session, which at this point I've set it up in the ebook that you don't need to hire me to do this exercise. Okay. When I typically do this with the person though, the first thing I write on the left side is the past. that we can't control the past. And a lot of people are
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, duh, we can't control the past. And I'm like, oh yeah? So why are you in the oh, but I should have done it this way. And what if I just had done it this way instead? And maybe if I had responded then or gone live at this time instead, you're trying to control the past at that point. It's
Yeah.
dumb. And so when people are like, oh yeah, duh, I can't control the past, and yeah, I can't control if people like me or not. Okay, but have you accepted it though? It's a big
Yeah,
difference.
that's so
Once
powerful.
so something you can control is accepting that you cannot control those things. And the minute you do, wow, so liberating.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah, I just got
if your
goosebumps
audience
from
right
that.
now just took a moment and said right now, without even having done this list, and whether you're driving, watching, whatever you're doing right now, you say, I accept the things that I cannot control. Feel
Love
it in
that.
your
Yeah.
body.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it sounds so obvious, but that's such a big limitation for people. Yeah.
Again, not something we were taught. I know some of
Yeah.
these, and a lot of the strategies I offer, right? Sometimes it could be as bobo as take a notepad, cut it in two, let's go, right? But if that's it, these tips and tricks and strategies and these tools basically could make immense of a difference in
Yeah.
someone's mental health and emotional wealth, like I like to call it, really.
Yeah.
And another thing that I want to point out, which is it's unfortunate because, well, this month is, well, I know in the US it's Mental Health Awareness Month. I don't know if it's like in the UK too, or it depends because some
No,
people are
it's
jumping on
October, I
that.
think. Yeah.
Okay, so some people have still been, talking about it on LinkedIn and other places, even though they're not in the US, they just kind of jump on that. So whatever the case may be, part of why I even shifted to calling myself an emotional wealth coach, right? Because
Mhm.
not everybody responds to mental health strategist. But imagine that I was initially a very trained psychotherapist, and I shifted from being called a psychotherapist to mental health strategist because the word
Yeah.
psychotherapist didn't get people really, interested. It just they had this
Yeah.
wrong idea of what that entails. So because of the word psycho preceding, it's unfortunate because really psycho comes from the word psyche in Greek. So I speak Greek fluently. Now, psyche in Greek translates to psyche in English, right? But for some reason they didn't call it psyche therapist. They decided to call it psychotherapist.
Psycho.
All right, thank you for messing that up because people just think, oh, psychotic. No. So let's all right. So unfortunately, people don't go get, the help, the tools or whatnot because of the word. So we changed the name around mental health strategy. And yet people will still get caught up on that because they still don't even know the difference between mental health and mental illness. When I
Yes.
experienced my depressive episode, not mine, the depressive episode, see, I still correct myself. So
Mhm.
when I experienced those depressive episodes, in that moment, I was mentally ill. Yes, I had ill mental health. Like, I don't know how else to put it. Like, now I'm not mentally ill. I don't have mental illness. That doesn't make me mentally healthy, though. So
Yes.
if you go, do a physical checkup, okay, you don't presently have a physical disease. It doesn't mean you're healthy either, right?
Yeah.
So there's that key distinction. But at the same time, as a result of living in Greece, and so many people asking me if I could provide my services here, whereas I do all my services virtually worldwide, but I don't want to provide them in Greek. Reason being, as fluent as I am, I still can't provide my service or my teachings at like the 110% that I can in English.
Right.
And at one point, when I'm trying to explain this to them, I'm like, if I can't do 110%, I'm not doing this. And imagine, I don't even know how to say mental health in Greek. So the person at that point tells me what, at least what they say in Greece. And he said, psychiki υγεία. Psychiki υγεία. Remember earlier I said psyche is the psyche, which is the soul.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wait a second. Psychiki υγεία does not translate to mental health. It translates to soul health.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Somewhere along the way, I don't know who botched up this translation because
Yeah.
most medical terms, or a lot of terms in psychology, but a good chunk of them from in medicine, derive from the Greek words.
Yeah.
That really helped me when I was studying in university and having to memorize material. It was great that I spoke Greek and I was able to just regurgitate a lot of these things. It was great. All right. For some reason, this translation was botched up. And so
Yeah.
instead of being called soul health, well, it's called mental health. Now, at the same time, you think, what's wrong with that? But somewhere, I don't know who decided this a long time ago, a negative connotation was slapped on the word mental. And there you have
Yes.
it. We
Yeah.
can't even be, taking steps towards investing in our mental health. Right? So see how like words, how much of a difference they make. And I think if it was called soul health, I think people would be more open to
Oh,
investing and taking
100%.
steps.
Yeah.
Like let me take this course on meeting my soul's needs. Like I'd never been taught how to listen to what my soul's really trying to say and make decisions that align with my soul. Oh, so
Yeah,
much
so
more
good. It would
powerful
be
and
so
insightful.
good.
Yeah. So I
I mean,
encourage your listeners and your clients to reflect on that. Like, what am
yeah,
I
no, I
doing for my
love that.
soul? I'm doing this for my business and I'm hiring this coach for my business, and it's great. But without emotional wealth, financial wealth is worthless.
Oh,
I I I,
absolutely.
I can
Yeah.
vouch. I almost died on more times than I could count on my hands. I had to shut down my business. There was no being depressed at that level, wanting to die and serving people and making money. No, there just wasn't.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So,
And it's just not like I am a business coach, and business is not the most important thing in the entire world. It just isn't. And like I am a business coach and I have learned a lot about social media and I teach social media and content creation, all of that. But I have also done a lot of work on my mental health and on my mindset. And that allows me to run a business with really healthy boundaries and with a schedule that I can stick to, and I can show up in the very best way for my audience, and not just my audience but for me and my family as well. And
mhm.
you know the fact that people think that mental health is a really negative connotation, we all have physical health, everyone's happy to work on their physical health, yet they're not happy to work on their mental health, which just blows my mind. And I think you're right, it is just so important.
Meanwhile, the mental health or the soul health affects everything. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, a lot of people's physical ailments do
Yeah.
stem from their poor mental health or just disregarding their soul's needs, if we want to put it differently. A lot
Yeah,
of
so
people who
true.
have, yeah, and people's immune systems shut down left and right as a result of having such a high stress response, right? Modern life has created an epidemic
Mm,
of depression and whatnot because of such a high stress response. And it's been, you know, demonstrated time and time again to what extent stress depletes our immune system.
mm.
Ergo, more people having physical illnesses
Yeah.
because their immune system has gone to hell due to all the stress that they're harboring and all the resentment, even, or the anger or whatnot, because that's another thing. Holding on to anger and resentment for 5 minutes, it's been demonstrated to suppress your immune system by 4.5 hours. Five
Wow.
minutes. Imagine being angry for a whole day because something didn't go right in your business. Wow. You
Yeah,
just,
or just living an angry life. I mean, a lot of people out there
whoa.
are just angry their whole lives. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which is
But I
unfortunate.
mean, yeah, I'm a really big believer that there's a thing called like soft businesses where, it's really flexible and it works with you as a person and with your needs. And I think we've got to be working towards that, haven't we? Especially as women who are, we have so many other commitments and so many other things going on. And yeah, like we the pressure to run businesses, work 9 to 5, work ourselves into the ground for perceived success is just insane to me. And I think everything that you have spoken about today really kind of aligns nicely with the fact that I try to teach my listeners and my audience and my clients that we need to be working towards running businesses that are flexible and that give us grace, and
Hmm. Hmm.
clients that are understanding towards us.
Oh yeah, one of my business coaches once told me, like, if it's not a heck yes client, like, it's not
Yeah.
just about you being the heck yes coach for them. Make sure it's a heck yes client for you too. And what that means is
Yeah.
listen to your needs, make sure you've written out what your top 10 most important needs in business are right now, but in your life as well. Take a
Yeah.
look and ask yourself, is this client really as a result of either their behavior, how resistant they may be just from that first call, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, will this be meeting my needs in business right now? Will this be meeting the needs in my life right now? If I have a higher need for peace right now in my life, would it be helpful to sign on with this client that,
Yeah.
may
It's
not be
not
as
going to give me
open
that.
as, yeah, if they're not open, like they're thinking, okay, let me get the help, but they're not coachable, then, well, I don't know
Yeah,
if that's
yeah.
what you want for your business right now, right? It's gotta be a
Yeah, we've
heck,
all been
it's gotta
there.
be a heck yes both ways.
Yeah.
It absolutely has to be. Yeah.
So moving on just a bit, I want you to talk about your It's 316 and I'm Alive movement, because we
Yeah.
haven't even touched upon that yet. And I feel like that's such a huge part of you and
Well,
your brand.
so I call it the I'm Alive movement, but essentially it also 316, the day, the time, plays a huge part in the I'm Alive movement. So for a lot of times people still just call it the 316 movement. I'm like, no, it's not just it's the I'm Alive movement. So um essentially, when I mentioned earlier, that if one person, if you've had a suicide attempt, you're more prone and vulnerable to having another in the future. So my first suicide attempt was on the third month and the 16th day of 2011. So 3/16/2011. I believe in Europe, it's usually like when you're writing the date out, it's like
It'll be
16
16/3.
3. Yeah, 16/3. But
Yeah.
back in North America, it's the other way around. So it
Yeah.
was 3/16 of 2011, where I had my first suicide attempt. And so 6 months later, when I recovered, someone asked me, because I that number was actually in my life quite a bit before that happened. It's just that on that day, I had no idea that it was 3/16 of 2011. I was very delusional. When you reach that point,
Yeah.
if you're attempting to end your life because you have a monster convincing you that your family's better off, then you've reached a delusional point. So you don't know what day it is. I didn't know what day it was, right? So whatever the case may be, 6 months later, I was in res because I was doing a program somewhere in Ontario, Canada, and I was wearing a hockey jersey that on the back of it had my family name and the number 3/16. So yeah, so some people, like some of the students in res, were like, yeah, that's not typical. On a jersey, soccer jersey, football jersey, whatever, you usually just see one number. You don't see like
Yeah.
two separate. So like, what is that? I'm like, listen, it's a really long story as to why it is, and talk about it in my book. So if anybody's interested, the book's available on Amazon, and just to keep ourselves in like some form of limited time here. Whatever the case may be, for like 14 years at least leading up to the suicide attempt, that number was part of my life. And in my like on my jerseys and my passwords and my graduation rings, you name it, it was just everywhere. So whatever the case, when somebody asked me, well, you know what, why that number? I said, look, this and this, and um, the reason that this person used this number back when it ingrained in my mind 14 years prior is because they were making reference to a quote in the Bible by John 3:16, and but that's not why it initially resonated with me. But whatever the case, one of them just said, well, what did John 3:16 really say anyway? I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm Christian, but I'm Greek Orthodox. We don't really get preoccupied with verses and whatnot. It's just not how our liturgy goes. So I don't even know let me just Google it. And when I did, the verse really resonated with me because it had to do with, if, let's say, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, for that he who may believe in him will, have eternal life and not perish. And it just really marked me at that point. I'm like, whoa, this is tense. I see why some call it, the biggest verse in the Bible. And I survived on that day.
Wow.
I was like, there was just something that aligned with me in that moment. I'm like, there's a reason I survived in that day. There's a reason I'm still here. This might be blessed by God, right? Like there's something here. I don't know. This is what I felt in that moment. And I started drawing on my wrist afterwards. I was no longer paying attention to the hockey game. I started drawing on my wrist. What you now see is this tattoo, right, of 3:16 on here. The next day I went to the tattoo parlor, rather than like I was in class, I was still drawing, wasn't paying attention. And then I went to the tattoo parlor and I got the 3:16 on here. So the numbers really became ingrained in my mind. And then I would stop and post on a Facebook status because we didn't have Twitter or Instagram back then. It's 3:16 and I'm stuck in traffic. It's 3:16 and I'm having coffee here. It's 3:16 and I'm writing a paper for a class I don't even want to be taking. So there was like positive 3:16 posts and like whatever, like frustrating 3:16
But just marking that
yeah,
timestamp.
I just kept going.
Yeah,
And then
I love it.
a couple months later, I was overwhelmed with all of the notifications. Imagine we didn't even have as many platforms as we have today.
Yeah.
I posted a lot of photos from my professional camera and everything, and I was getting overwhelmed with the notifications. I had to focus on my studies. So I decided to deactivate my account. At which point, in the week that I deactivated my account, people started text messaging me. It's 3:16. What are you doing? I was like, okay, so people are actively pausing in their day right now to ask me what I'm doing.
Amazing.
Oh, hold on a second. There's something more here than people stopping to wonder what Sophia is doing. So eventually, a couple of years later, on the 5-year anniversary, I came out on Instagram, and it was a written note that I put as a picture, let's say, that said, you know what, a lot of you have been wondering why I posted 3:16 the last 5 years. Well, on this day, 3/16 of 2011, I attempted to die. And ever since then, I'm extremely grateful to be alive. And when I post at 3:16, it's because I'm grateful to be alive, to be doing whatever the hell it is I'm doing at 3:16. So if it's a bad day, I'm just so grateful to be alive when 3:16 rolls around, because it's a reminder that I survived. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful to be
so
alive.
moving.
So from there, it was like, people started calling, what's happening? So then the following year, I did a video. And Instagram at the time, you could only do 1 minute. So I did a
Yeah.
minute saying, this is what this is about. And my wedding was coming up a month later. So I was like, I'm going to take this movement further right after the wedding. Unfortunately, like I said, depression doesn't discriminate. A shortage of self love can kill you. And well, a shortage of self love, my ignoring my needs during my wedding planning,
Oh,
building my business, and all that jazz led to one more depressive episode literally a month after my honeymoon that lasted
wow.
13 months long. So I had to like pause the movement. But then when I recovered from that 13 months later, my father unfortunately was diagnosed with a prostate cancer. So we started all trying, he's still with us. So we started like, caregiving. I started getting into a caregiver role, but also helping in the family business. And I said, you know what, coaching, counseling is just not for me anymore, because every time I'm in the middle of like great work with clients and things like this, well, not every time, but at least a couple of times it happened where I end up getting these nasty episodes and I can't continue with people. So I don't want to leave them hanging. So you know what, just leave it be. But luckily, because of the Movember Foundation, since I said I will start fundraising for the Movember Foundation since it was highlighted on prostate cancer and whatnot. But it was also, now they had a twofold purpose, and one of them was to prevent med suicide. So I was like, oh, here's a way I could still, help with the mental health piece. But beyond that, you weren't getting me to counsel or coach. 2 months after that, unfortunately, my good friend's sister died by suicide.
Oh
And
gosh.
I didn't know the girl for years because she had moved to Florida when she was much younger. So I only got to meet her like about 10 days before, and we connected through my story. And even though I wasn't going to take her on professionally, I said, I'd be on the side at the same time and,
Yeah.
connecting as much as, and because she finally felt understood, right? Like she found someone that I was finishing her sentences. And yet, unfortunately, we didn't get the chance to continue. And
Oh, that's awful.
yeah. And yet at the same time, it realigned me on my path.
Mm.
And I swore at that point, I'm like, okay, it's wanting people to pause, on 316 day with me. It's not just me celebrating being alive on 316 day. Every year, let's pause together. Let's put this day on a calendar. Let's make this a worldwide movement where people stop on that day and do two things. Practice gratitude, embody it. Yeah, as much as you can that entire day. Just feel the beautiful benefits of gratitude the whole day. Sit there, share it, post it. Hashtag it's 316 and I'm alive. And if you've had a mental health related struggle, talk about it as well so we could normalize the conversation. That's what 316 Day was about. And it was born in 2019, basically, as a result of my friend's sister dying by
Yeah.
suicide. So from there, it turned into as well getting other people to stop at 316, inviting others onto my posts. So if one goes to the site of the movement, you'll see there's other people sharing gratitude from different parts of the world featured on my profile.
Yeah.
And then from there, I was like, okay, let's just keep going with this. So getting other people, I'd love for people worldwide to stop at 316. Just set an alarm for those who are listening right now. Take a
Yes.
second,
I was
set
just
an
gonna
alarm
say
on
that.
your phone, set an alarm on your phone, let it go off. And in that moment, take a minute,
Yes,
like,
just a moment of gratitude. Yeah. Okay.
or
So I challenge everybody listening to this, just
yeah.
either set an alarm or, whatever works for you. But I want you to post about, noticing that it's 316 and what the things that you're grateful for.
And
And make sure you tag me and Sophia in it. That would be
yeah,
amazing.
and if you add the hashtag, it's 316 and I'm alive. Like, if people go on Facebook and Instagram, they'll notice already quite a bit of content under there. That's the way we could spread this movement further. It's
Wonderful.
becoming a thing on LinkedIn too, because I just shifted over there as
Oh,
well.
cool.
And remember, it's not just about okay, you think about it for a moment, what you're feeling grateful about, it's cool, and then you go and you make a post. But I really want you to embody the gratitude at that point. It's not just like, oh yeah, I'm totally grateful that I did well on my test today. And okay,
Yeah,
but
that
are
it's
you
sunny
really
today.
are you feeling it? Are you really feeling the gratitude though?
Yeah,
Like that, like, there's tons of, honestly, in the community, once they sign up for the I Dare You to Love Yourself ebook, there's tons of stuff on gratitude as well in there,
I
including the
love that.
free toolkit where they can start learning how to practice gratitude more
I
because
am big on gratitude. My
huge.
4-year-old has a gratitude journal that we fill in every single night.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, we are
that's
a big fans of gratitude in this house. So I'm on board with this and I am joining this movement.
yes. I
So
love
can
that.
I ask you, what has been your career highlight in everything that you have achieved and everyone you've helped? What has been a highlight for you?
Being able to convert adversity into prosperity at the level that I have. That's
Yes, I mean,
definitely big.
amazing.
I mean,
They're
I've been
just
smacked down, I don't know how many times at this point, right? And I keep coming back, and I'm actually grateful that I've had those experiences. And,
yeah,
at first it's like, what?
yeah,
But imagine integrating gratitude in your life so much, recognizing its power, recognizing how much more resilient you become, especially in times of adversity. Gratitude is vital in the face of adversity. So being able to actually pull out the good from the worst moments of your life and to really embody the gratitude surrounding that, even though it's been, yes, depressive episodes with multiple suicide attempts. I'm grateful all of that happened because it has led to everything we're talking about today, to me writing the book that I just did and writing part 2 as we speak. And there's more to come after that. So honestly, it comes down to converting adversity into prosperity has been the highlight,
yeah.
I would say.
What a position of strength for you to be in as well. If you can take literally the worst thing that could possibly happen to you that almost ended your life
Mm-hmm.
and turn that into something positive, I don't think there's a stronger position to be in.
I agree.
Amazing.
I agree.
And what has your win of the week been just this week?
Um, oh man, there's been a few. There actually have
I mean,
been a
if
few.
we're talking about practicing gratitude, I love to end with this because I think it's
Okay.
important to look at the little moments and be grateful for them.
Yeah, the win of the week for sure. I mean, there's a few things because I practice gratitude so much, I could sit here and
Yeah.
pull out a list of like 15, 20 things already from this week. But I'll go with one of the most recent wins, which was a call I had yesterday with somebody that I met on LinkedIn, who literally I didn't even remember how we connected on LinkedIn, but I noticed that because LinkedIn tends to do that. Like if somebody goes live, I'm going to get a
Yeah.
notification, right, that this person was live. I missed it. I saw it an hour later. But I saw that it was about depression and whatnot. And I was like, wow, we need to connect. I would love to go live with you and spread this message further. And we did connect yesterday and we spoke. And it was a beautiful connection that like fostered so much more collaboration than I had anticipated. There was so many other things that
Amazing.
we had in common that, we could work on together and beyond getting the message out. Down to collaborating in a retreat together that would want to hold like so many beautiful. You never know what's on the other side of a conversation.
Oh,
Never know, and
absolutely.
there was just so many beautiful things that came out of that conversation that will only serve people, quite a bit in the future. So yeah, I
That's
definitely
your win.
I would go with that's the win. Yeah.
And that's a really great example. Like I tell my students that, posting content isn't actually just about making sales. Like the opportunities
Oh
that
yeah.
come
Oh
from
yeah.
posting content, consuming content, just showing up, being present
Mm-hmm,
online,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
are beyond your wildest imagination. And that's
Oh
a really
yes.
good example. And
Yes.
I think I can only wrap this up by saying that you are an incredible example of what happens if it all works out. Like you are really inspirational and
Thank
I
you.
love what you're doing. And I am
Thank
so
you.
grateful that you've come on today and to talk to everybody. And I think that, we talk a lot about business and we talk a lot about content and strategy, but everything comes down to your mindset and and to your mental health, and if you haven't got that, you've got nothing. So yeah, thank you so much, Sophia, for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Sophie. I really appreciate it. I'm beyond grateful for opportunities like this. So thank you.
Me too. Wow. Honestly, that discussion moved me to tears in parts, and I am not a crier. But I think we can all take something extremely important from Sophia's words, and that's that without our mental health, we have very little that actually matters. We must look after ourselves physically and mentally to A, be the best business owners we can be, but B, to live a full life, to reap the benefits of all of our hard work, and for there to be any point to all of this. If we don't, it's all completely useless. And if I can teach my students nothing else inside of my programs, it's that boundaries and self-care are a fundamental part of achieving healthy success. So I will leave you with that. I'm sure you've got a ton to think about, and I will see you next week for another episode of What If It All Works Out.